The Galactic Accord had stood for over 1,000 years, a fragile peace upheld by treaties, diplomacy, and the ever-present threat of mutual annihilation. But in the end, peace was an illusion. The Sith's dominion shattered that illusion in a single night. Their fleets emerged from subspace like a tide of fire, burning entire Accord worlds to cinders. The Siths were not conquerors, they were exterminators. The insectoid Threxians, the avian Corlith, the silicon-based Hadron, entire species were wiped from the stars in mere weeks. The Accord's desperate counterattacks were crushed, their leaders executed live on Sith's war broadcasts. And then, the Dominion turned its crimson eyes toward Terra. The demand was simple: submit or be erased. The United Terran Directorate, the fractured coalition of Earth's remaining leaders, knew surrender meant slavery. Humanity would become vassals, foot soldiers, or meat for the Dominion's ever-hungry war machine. But resistance seemed impossible. The Sith's fleet dwarfed humanity's forces 100-fold. The Accord's strongest empires had fallen in days. What chance did Earth have? Yet there was one thing the Dominion failed to understand. Humanity was born for war. On Luna Base, the greatest military minds humanity had ever produced gathered for a final decision. War was inevitable, but if they were to stand a chance, they needed a strategy, one that Sithis would never see coming. At the head of the War Council stood General Adrian Wolf, a man whose very name was synonymous with victory. Ruthless, calculating, and feared even among his own people, Wolf had won wars on a dozen worlds, his tactics bordering on the inhuman. Now he faced his greatest challenge: survival against an enemy that had never known defeat. His voice cut through the room like a blade. If we fight like the Accord, we die like the Accord. Silence. The remaining generals exchanged uncertain glances. Wolf was known for his brutality, his willingness to sacrifice thousands to save millions. But even for him, this war seemed unwinnable. We will not fight them head-on, Wolf continued. We will fight like the predators we were meant to be. We will make them bleed. We will make them suffer. We will burn their fleets and carve their warlords apart. We will show them what happens when they threaten Terra. No one spoke. Then, slowly, Marshal Helena Valdez grinned. Then let's start the hunt. The plan was set in motion. The first step: Titan's Gate, a seemingly insignificant choke point in the Sol system. It would become the largest killing field in human history. Wolf issued the orders. Fleet movements were concealed. The system's asteroid belts were weaponized. Mines were hidden. Automated turrets were deployed in the darkness. The Sithis would believe they were invading a weak, scattered species. Instead, they were walking into a human-made nightmare. And when the trap was sprung, the galaxy would hear humanity's answer to the Dominion's demand. We do not submit. We survive. And then we conquer. The Sithis invasion fleet arrived at Titan's Gate like a storm of fire and steel. Thousands of warships emerged from subspace, their black hulls blotting out the stars. Their commanders, arrogant in their empire's supremacy, saw only prey, a primitive species waiting to be slaughtered. The Dominion had crushed civilizations far greater than humanity. This battle, they believed, would be no different. They were wrong. The moment that Sithis Armada crossed Titan's Gate, General Adrian Wolf gave the order: execute Protocol Requiem. In an instant, the battlefield transformed. Titan's largest asteroid detonated from within, revealing thousands of concealed railgun platforms, each unleashing a synchronized barrage of hypervelocity slugs. A wall of kinetic energy shredded the lead Sithis warships, ripping through armor and vaporizing entire crews before they could react. Then came the minefields. Stealth mines, disguised as drifting space debris, detonated in rapid succession. Waves of nuclear-tipped charges and plasma warheads ripped through the Sithis formations, turning organized battle groups into clouds of wreckage. The Sithis fleet, designed for overwhelming frontal assaults, had never faced an enemy that fought from the shadows. Confusion spread through their ranks. Admiral Xalvok, the Xathus fleet commander, bellowed orders to regroup, but the humans were already moving. Admiral Elias Kane, the Ghost of Mars, led a squadron of stealth corvettes into the chaos, darting between the burning wreckage and launching precision strikes on command vessels. One by one, the Xathus flagships vanished in silent explosions. Desperation gripped the invaders. Their forces were still numerically superior, but superiority meant nothing against an enemy that refused to fight fair. Human ships detected behind us, a Xathus officer roared. Xalvok turned, his eyes widening. A second human fleet had emerged from Titan's shadow, Wolf's personal strike force. Before the Xathus could react, Wolf's fleet fired a coordinated railgun salvo. The kinetic rounds smashed through Xalvok's command ship, cutting through its shields like paper. His flagship split in half. The Xathus admiral barely had time to comprehend his defeat before he was swallowed by the void. The massacre continued. Within hours, half the Xathus fleet had been annihilated. The surviving Xathus ships scrambled to escape, but there was no retreat. Mars' defense grid activated, unleashing long-range mass driver cannons. Enormous slugs, traveling at near-relativistic speeds, punched through capital ships like spears through flesh. It was not a battle. It was a slaughter. The final Xathus warship, a lone destroyer, sent out a distress signal before being obliterated. The message was simple. Terra is not weak. The humans are monsters. Across the Dominion, the unthinkable happened. Fear of humanity spread like wildfire. And as the wreckage of the Xathus fleet drifted through the void, Adrian Wolf watched from his command deck, his voice cold and resolute. Let them come again. The Xathus Dominion had never known fear, until Titan's Gate. The massacre shattered their illusion of human inferiority. The Dominion's warlords, once laughing at Terra's resistance, now whispered of monsters hidden in the dark. The few surviving Xathus ships limped back to their empire, spreading one undeniable truth. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was a predator. But for Admiral Elias Kane, Titan's Gate was just the opening move. Kane was known as the Ghost of Mars, a man who never fought fair, never engaged in open battle unless victory was assured. His warships moved like wraiths through the void, striking unseen, leaving only wreckage behind. Now he was given a single mission: cripple the Dominion's war machine. The Xathus fleet was powerful, but it required fuel, supplies, and logistics to function. Without them, their ships were little more than floating coffins, and Kane knew exactly where to strike. The ambush at Eridani Rift. The Xathus supply convoy drifted through the Eridani Rift, a lawless sector known for its dense asteroid fields. Hundreds of freighters and fuel carriers moved in tight formation, guarded by an escort fleet of destroyers and cruisers. The Xathus commander, War Director Savrak, was wary. The humans are treacherous, he snarled to his officers. They do not fight with honor. Maintain full alert. It didn't matter. The humans were already there. From the blackness of space, Kane's ghost fleet activated their phase cloaks, experimental technology that bent light and heat, rendering them invisible to standard scanners. They had been shadowing the convoy for 3 days. And now, they struck. The first explosions came from within the Xathus fleet. Sabotage teams, disguised as mercenaries, had infiltrated the freighters days before. As they triggered EMP charges and reactor overloads, several Xathus vessels erupted in flames. Panic spread instantly. Then came the real attack. Human warships decloaked in perfect synchronization. Kane's fleet emerged like phantoms, unleashing pinpoint railgun fire into the Xathus formation. Boom, boom, boom. Xathus destroyers crumpled under the onslaught, their armor shattered before they could return fire. Savrak screamed orders, but it was too late. The convoy was in chaos, some ships trying to fight, others breaking formation in blind panic. Kane saw his moment. All forward units. Crush them. Stealth corvettes slipped between the enemy lines, launching high-yield plasma torpedoes at the fuel carriers. Each detonation triggered a chain reaction, turning the rift into a firestorm. One by one, the Dominion's supply ships vanished in nuclear hellfire. By the time the last Xethys warship exploded, over 90% of the convoy was annihilated. Kane's fleet disappeared just as swiftly as it had arrived. The Xethys survivors sent out distress signals, but there would be no reinforcements. There was nothing left to reinforce. The Dominion had lost an entire war front's worth of supplies, and Elias Kane, watching from the darkness, allowed himself a rare smirk. Let them starve. The war was no longer about survival. After Titan's Gate and the Eridani Rift, the Xethys Dominion had suffered humiliating defeats. Their fleets were bleeding ships, their supply lines were in ruins, yet in their arrogance, they refused to believe they were losing. To reassert their dominance, the Dominion launched a full-scale planetary invasion, targeting New Sparta, one of humanity's most heavily fortified colonies. They expected to break human morale. Instead, they found Marshal Helena Valdez. Known as the Iron Wolf, Valdez was the most feared ground commander in human history. She had spent her entire life preparing for this moment, turning New Sparta into an impenetrable fortress, a meat grinder designed to consume invaders. And now, it was time to show the Xethys what real war looked like. The slaughter begins. The Xethys landed with overwhelming force. 5 million troops, 300 war machines, and enough firepower to level a continent. They expected a swift conquest. Instead, they walked into hell. The moment their dropships touched down, the sky erupted with fire. Autonomous artillery platforms, hidden deep in the mountains, rained hypersonic shells onto the landing zones. Plasma mortars turned entire battalions into molten slag before they could take formation. And then the infantry counterattack began. Human shock troopers, clad in advanced exo-armor, emerged from underground bunkers like demons. They struck in brutal, coordinated waves, close-quarters ambushes, hit-and-run assaults, sniper nests in the ruined cities. The Xethys, accustomed to overwhelming their enemies, found themselves fighting ghosts in the ruins. Valdez led from the front. She wielded a railgun rifle as easily as a sidearm, her movements precise and lethal. Where she fought, the Xethys died in droves. The Dominion commander, Overlord Razek, grew desperate. He ordered a scorched earth assault, deploying incendiary drones to burn entire districts to ash. Valdez didn't flinch. "They think they can break us," she growled over the comms. "Break them first." The turning point. On the 5th day of the battle, the Xethys launched their final push, a massive mechanized assault, deploying siege crawlers that could level entire cities. It was their last mistake. Valdez had anticipated this. Hidden deep beneath the ruins, human engineers had planted plasma-charged demolition rigs. The moment the crawlers rolled in, she gave the order. Detonate. Boom. The entire battlefield erupted in explosions. Skyscrapers collapsed, underground tunnels imploded, and the Xethys were swallowed by fire and rubble. Razek barely had time to process his failure before Valdez personally stormed his command bunker. As he reached for his weapon, she shot him twice in the chest. Then, as the life drained from his eyes, she leaned in. "This is our world, not yours." New Sparta was secured. The Xethys had not just lost a battle. They had learned a terrible truth. Humanity didn't just fight. Humanity hunted. The Xethys Dominion had suffered humiliation after humiliation. Titan's Gate had shattered their fleets. The Eridani Rift had starved their war machine. New Sparta had bled their armies dry. But now, the Dominion had abandoned all pretense of strategy. Now, they wanted revenge. A colossal invasion fleet, the largest ever assembled in Dominion history, emerged from subspace at the edge of the Sol system. Over 10,000 warships, backed by planetary assault carriers, and millions of soldiers, burned toward Earth. The Dominion's goal was simple: wipe humanity from existence, burn their homeworld to ashes. Let the galaxy witness the consequences of defying the Xethys. But humanity was waiting, and they were ready. The battle for Mars. The first wave struck Mars. The Xethys sought to establish a forward base on the Red Planet, but they found themselves walking into a battlefield engineered for slaughter. Under the command of General Adrian Wolf, Mars had been transformed into a planetary death trap. Orbital defense grids fired relativistic kill shots, slicing Xethys capital ships in half before they could deploy troops. Buried artillery emplacements launched precision strikes, breaking their formations. Atmospheric drone swarms swarmed dropships, tearing through hulls like piranhas. The Xethys forces that landed were met by Marshal Helena Valdez and her Iron Wolves. She led her soldiers in brutal trench warfare, forcing the Xethys into tight urban combat, where their size and numbers worked against them. Entire regiments were lured into dead-end kill zones, where they were bombarded into extinction. The battle raged for 3 days. On the 4th, the last Xethys commander attempted to surrender. Valdez shot him in the head. "You came to kill us all. You get no mercy." The fire over Earth. Mars had been a distraction. The true battle was for Earth. With Wolf and Valdez holding the line, the Dominion launched their main assault on the homeworld itself. The sky turned red with plasma fire as the Xethys unleashed a full orbital bombardment. Major cities were leveled. Millions of civilians died in the opening hours. But humanity refused to break. Across every continent, Earth's final defenses activated. Space elevators collapsed, their destruction forming makeshift orbital barricades. EMP warheads detonated in low orbit, crippling Xethys targeting systems. Militarized AI networks hijacked Xethys ships, turning their own weapons against them. Still, the Dominion pressed forward. The last human fleets were outnumbered 10-1. It seemed as though Earth would fall. Then, a signal echoed across every human channel, a voice the galaxy had not heard in years. "This is Grand Warlord Dominic Voss. Effective immediately, I am assuming command. Stand by for counterattack." The legend had returned, and with him, humanity's ultimate weapon, Project Ragnarok. The battle for Earth had become a war of attrition. Though humanity's defenses had held longer than the Xethys anticipated, the Dominion still had the numbers, the firepower, and the sheer will to destroy. The sky burned as human warships were torn apart. Cities crumbled under orbital bombardments. But then, Grand Warlord Dominic Voss arrived. Voss had once been humanity's most feared military leader, a warlord in everything but name. Ruthless, brilliant, and utterly uncompromising, he had disappeared from the public eye years ago. Now he returned not as a man, but as a harbinger of death. His fleet emerged from a hidden quantum gate near Jupiter, moving at impossible speeds. They cut through the Dominion's rear lines like predators descending on prey. And at the heart of this assault was Project Ragnarok, a single, massive dreadnought, the largest warship ever constructed by human hands. Its primary weapon, a singularity cannon capable of unleashing miniaturized black holes onto enemy formations. The first shot collapsed an entire Xethys battle group in an instant, tearing warships into nothingness. The second shot ripped open the Dominion's flagship. For the first time in their history, the Xethys fleet knew terror. The last gambit. But while the battle in space turned against them, the Xethys still had one final weapon. Warmaster Zarthel the Butcher, the architect of the war, the one responsible for the extermination of entire species, had personally led an invasion force to Mars. If he couldn't have Earth, he would turn Mars into a graveyard. This was his final gambit. General Adrian Wolf and Marshal Helena Valdez led the defense, but the Xethys numbers were overwhelming. The battle turned to brutal close-quarters combat in the tunnels of Olympus Mons. Bodies stacked up. Blood flooded the trenches, and yet the humans refused to fall. But Wolf knew this wasn't enough. "If we want to win this war, I have to cut off the head." Despite his injuries, Wolf led an elite strike team straight into Zarthal's command fortress. The battle was vicious, a bloodbath of blades and gunfire. One by one, Wolf's soldiers fell, until it was only him and the War Master. The duel was merciless. Zarthal fought with brute force, his plasma-forged blades capable of slicing through steel. But Wolf was faster, smarter, and far deadlier. In the end, Zarthal fell. The great War Master of the Dominion collapsed to his knees, choking on his own blood. Wolf, bleeding out himself, leaned in close and whispered, "Humanity doesn't die. We evolve." Then, with his last strength, he slit Zarthal's throat. A dying order. As Wolf lay dying, he activated his final transmission. "Voss, it's done. End this war. No mercy." Then the battlefield fell silent. The greatest human strategist was gone. But his final order would shape the future, and the Warlords of Terra would not rest until the Dominion was erased from history. With War Master Zarthal dead and Mars secured, the tide of war had irreversibly turned. The Dominion, once an empire of unquestioned supremacy, now found itself in a position it had never known: utter vulnerability. Their fleet was in full retreat, their forces shattered, their leadership in chaos. But Grand Warlord Dominic Voss had no intention of letting them escape. Humanity had suffered too much. The billions lost in the bombardment of Earth, the fallen warriors of Titan's Gate, New Sparta, and Mars, the death of Adrian Wolf. No treaties, no ceasefires, no mercy. The only acceptable outcome was extermination. And so, as the Tethys fleet limped away, Voss activated the final phase of the war, Operation Extinction. The hunt begins. Using hyperspace tracking technology stolen from the Dominion itself, Voss pinpointed the exact escape route of the Tethys fleet. They were fleeing to Velos Prime, their most heavily fortified colony, a world that had never fallen in 10,000 years. Voss's response: burn it. He gathered every remaining human warship, a force now feared across the stars. The Ghost Fleet, the Iron Wolves, the remnants of Mars defenders. Every last human soldier who had lost family, homes, or comrades volunteered for the final assault. This wasn't just war. This was revenge. The fire over Velos Prime. The Dominion barely had time to reinforce their defenses before the full might of humanity descended upon them. From the moment the first human warships emerged from hyperspace, the outcome was inevitable. Project Ragnarok fired first, launching a singularity round directly into the planet's defense grid. The explosion collapsed the orbital station, sending it crashing into the capital city. Stealth corvettes bypassed the front lines, surgically assassinating Dominion admirals before they could issue orders. Elias Kane's Ghost Fleet engaged in precision strikes, severing the Dominion's ability to organize counterattacks. But the true terror came when Voss himself led the ground invasion. Thousands of drop pods rained down like meteorites, slamming into the heart of Velos Prime. The Iron Wolves, the most elite of Earth's warriors, tore through Tethys ranks with ruthless efficiency. Voss fought at the front, wielding a railgun cannon so massive it required an exosuit to handle. No survivors. That was the only order. The Tethys, once the galaxy's most feared conquerors, were now reduced to prey. They begged for mercy. They found none. Entire cities were leveled. Their hatcheries, where the next generations of Tethys warlords were bred, were burned to the ground. The final Dominion leaders tried to flee the system. Voss personally hunted them down. And when the last warlord of the Dominion lay at his feet, broken and beaten, Voss spoke the last words that Tethys would ever hear. "This is humanity's galaxy now." Then he pulled the trigger. The Dominion was no more. The war was over. The Tethys Dominion, once the most feared empire in the galaxy, no longer existed. Their fleets were destroyed. Their warlords lay dead. Their homeworlds burned. For the first time in recorded history, Humanity stood alone at the top, yet there was no celebration. The stars were littered with the wreckage of countless battles. Planets that once held billions of souls were now lifeless ruins. Earth itself was scared, its surface still smoldering from orbital bombardments. And among the ashes, the warlords of humanity gathered one final time. The fate of the galaxy. On Luna Base, the leaders of the war effort stood in silence. Dominic Voss, the Grand Warlord, whose iron will had guided humanity to victory. Helena Valdez, the Iron Wolf, the undefeated warrior who had broken the Dominion on the battlefield. Elias Kane, the Ghost of Mars, the master of shadow warfare, who had reduced the Dominion's war machine to dust. But Adrian Wolf was gone. His absence loomed over them like a phantom. His strategies had won the war, yet he would never see its end. Voss was the first to speak. We did what we had to. Now we decide what comes next. Humanity had always been the underdog, always the scrappy survivor fighting for a place among giants. But now, there were no giants left. The remaining alien species, many of whom had once called humanity primitive, watched in silent horror. They had seen what humans could do to an empire that threatened them. Now they asked themselves, would Terra turn its sights on them next? The warlords had a choice. Would humanity rule the galaxy with an iron fist, conquering, dominating, ensuring no threat could ever rise against them again? Or would they build something new, a future not ruled by fear, but by something greater? The final decision. Valdez broke the silence. Wolf died so that we could have this choice. Her voice was hard, but her eyes burned with something more conviction. He didn't fight so we could become the next Dominion. He fought so that humanity would never have to kneel again. Kane exhaled slowly. And if we leave the galaxy in ruins, we'll be fighting new wars forever. For a long moment, Voss said nothing. The blood of billions was on his hands. He had led the final charge, wiped out the Dominion without hesitation. He had given the order, no survivors. But now, the war was over. Finally, he nodded. Then we rebuild. And with those words, the new era of humanity began. Not as conquerors, not as tyrants, but as the new rulers of the stars. The warlords of Terra had risen, and the galaxy would never be the same again.